tax regime.
Yeah, Tanya, I think to a very large extent you have a point there, but so far the GST Council has taken the decision unanimously, and I think the problem would have been with respect to certain states which would have raised their concerns over that limit. So I think that flexibility has been given to them at the cost of course, the complexity which would come into the number game.
The composition scheme threshold limit has also been hiked to 1.5 crore rupees from the existing 1 crore, and the businesses availing the scheme will need to now file just one annual return and pay taxes once every quarter. This has eased the compliance burden on small businesses, but what do you think has motivated it?
See, I think that's a very, very, very welcome move, I would say, because even under the excise regime, the exemption limit was there. So I think moving from 1 crore to 1.5 crore is a welcome and a bold step. I think the industry would appreciate that move from the government. The related point remains that with respect to the service providers, the limit of the composition is 50 lakhs, and there is an exemption till 40 lakhs. So there is just a very, very minute difference of 10 lakh rupees. So all those service providers who would fall between 40 to 50 lakh rupees will get that benefit. So I think I have a concern there, not only because of the rate, because the composition rate for service providers has been kept at 6% as compared to the manufacturers or the traders where the rate is 1%. So I think one is that aspect, and second is I think the limit for 50 lakh rupees for the composition scheme for the service providers is too less. I think he could have raised that to 75 lakhs or to 1 crore in case he was raising the exemption limit to 40 lakhs.
Abhishek, last question then, and this is a decision on real estate. Now, of course, the council has said today that it's being sent to the group of ministers to study it further, but it's also, a cut that could hurt the affordable housing players since they can't claim input tax credit. Do you think a decision now is maybe pushed only post-elections?
So I think, Tanya, if I were to look at the real estate sector, the first and the moot point is whether there is a need for the rate cut. Of course, there is a need for the rate cut. It goes without saying. Second pertinent question which arises is that how do you divide the entire sector? Of course, there has to be a division with respect to the affordable schemes and the other schemes other than the affordable schemes. So I think clearly there has to be a difference with respect to the rate. I personally feel that there should not be the break of the credit chain. They should be eligible to take the credit. Probably what could happen is that there could be two rates, 5% for the affordable housing scheme with credits and 8% for other than the affordable housing scheme with credits. I have done a lot of this number computation because when I filed the writ petition for the real estate player for anti-profiteering, I did a lot of this number crunching. And when the rate is 8%, they get the credit to the extent of 60%, which is about 4.5 to 5%. So affordable housing, if kept at 5% on the output side, will get most of the credits. Now, if we replicate that rate and the rate becomes 8%, then I think to the extent of 5% or 5.5%, they would be eligible to get the credits. So the differential 2.5 basis points is what they will have to pay. So I think those rates will have to be recommended to the committee. And there are other problems also. I think because real estate is one sector which needs to be looked into very, very carefully. I think there are other issues such as joint development agreements where the matter has gone to the court. Separate petitions have been filed to have tax implications on these issues.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Is with us. And Abhishek, what are your observations? The fact that the Finance Minister or the GST Council has increased the GST exemption limit does help small businesses quite a fair bit.
See, I think as far as the exemption limit question is concerned, I think it's a good move from the perspective of the service provider and the small suppliers that they get the benefit of the exemption. But understand it from two perspectives. One, we have filed the writ petition which challenges the tax which needs to be paid when these transactions are from the unregistered dealers. Which means that today, let's say if I am exempted and I'm getting the benefit of that exemption and I render services to someone else or I'm a supplier to someone else, the person to whom the services are or the supplies are made is required to pay tax under the reverse charge mechanism. So we have challenged that provision, and I think that becomes very relevant now further because the limit increases from 20 lakhs to 40 lakhs, which means that there will be larger chunk of suppliers who would fall within that bracket. And the entire purpose of increasing these exemption limits goes for a toss if the corresponding benefit is not given. And in the courts also we have drawn a corollary or a chronology or an analogy when these transactions are with respect to the income taxes. You give exemption on one side but you make some other person.
Companies with us. Abhishek, while much along expected lines, or rather much against market expectations, a group of ministers is going to now decide on what happens to GST and real estate and whether or not there should be that 5% cut for under construction houses. But nonetheless, some important announcements there. The fact that GST exemption limit has now been doubled.
Yeah, I think as far as the exemption limit is concerned, I think that's a good move because what has happened is that there will be a lot of people in the MSME sector, especially in the services sector, which will get that benefit. So from that perspective, I think it's a good move. The only point which needs to be pondered over there is that the limit is 40 lakhs for exemption and 50 lakhs for composition for services at the rate of 6%, which means that very few players would be between 40 lakh limit and the 50 lakh limit. That's the first point. The second related point is that there could be possibility that even with respect to the service sector, there could be sectors where there is high input tax credit cost. And if that's the situation, then the composition scheme may not work at all because, taxing services at a composition rate of 6%. And we will have to go into the details, but it looks quite probable that there would be denial of credit with respect to the composition for service providers. And if that happens, then to a very large extent, the scheme may not be very feasible when it comes to number crunching. Answering your point